Yesterday, we told you about San Francisco's new fat acceptance czar. I think that was her official title. This is a woman that has been hired by the city to consult with them on how to better promote obesity and heart disease. Promote those things, not fight them or combat them or treat them, but promote them. They want to promote it. They want to celebrate it. And so over the last day or two, more videos of this woman, Virgie Tover is her name, have surfaced. Videos of this now tax-funded fat consultant. And I just want to play a couple of these for you, and we'll start with this. This is our friend Virgie, tax-funded fat consultant in San Francisco now, before she got the gig, I believe, declaring that, quote, nobody has to be healthy, which is an interesting statement. Let's listen.
Where do you see the intersection, really? What is your definition of health?
Yeah, that's really complicated, right? I think I want to talk about that question, but I want to start by saying that, no one has to be healthy. No, right? Like, I mean, it's like, no, like there is no governing body that's like out there putting, you know what I mean? It's like no one owes anybody that in either the traditional sense of the word or any other more innovative or, more politicized, maybe even version of that word. So I think it's important to say like, and I want to back up and bring in intersectionality and say like, right, like look at the disabled community, right? Like I think people with disabilities have and activists within that space have consistently been saying like, I'm never going to be your notion of healthy. That doesn't mean I don't get to be a full human. You get to treat me some kind of way, right? And so I think that I love taking that principle within disability rights to fat activism and to understandings of fatness. So I want to start there, right? Like no matter what size you are, you don't owe anybody else your health. But I mean, for me, right, like in an ideal world where there wouldn't be health-based gatekeeping.
So she says that nobody has to be healthy. There's no governing body forcing you to be healthy. Well, first of all, RFK Jr. might have something to say about that very soon. But that aside, yes, you are correct that you don't have to be healthy. You have the right to be unhealthy, I suppose, if you want to put it that way. You have the right legally to become fat and diseased and die before you turn 40. You don't have the moral right, because a moral right that you in fact have a moral obligation to be healthy and to take care of your body, take care of your health. That's a moral obligation that you have. So you actually don't have the moral right to abuse yourself to the extent that you become morbidly obese. But you do have the legal right, and our legal rights and our moral, you have legal rights and moral obligations, and sometimes those things line up and sometimes they don't. But sure, legally, like no one can legally require you to not be fat. And I think that even with RFK Jr. coming in, it would be very hard to come up with a law. Even in a scenario where I ascend to my throne and become a dictator of the hemisphere, I'm not even sure that I would outlaw obesity. I would outlaw a lot of things, don't get me wrong, but I don't know that I would outlaw obesity just because the enforcement mechanism just seems like a pain, and it's not worth my time. So yeah, you have the legal right to be fat and to die. But here we see the very common confusion, common in modern culture, this common confusion between what we have the right to do and what is right to do. And for a lot of people, especially people on the left, especially somebody like this, they just very much struggle. They conflate those things. They don't understand that it's like when, and this is why they'll often respond, when you make a moral statement and you say, you should be healthy. You should take care of your health. You should take care of your body. And when you say that, they'll respond by saying, well, I don't have to. I don't have to do that. You can't tell me what to do. It's like, well, you don't have to, but you should. So we're talking about what you should do, what is right to do, not what you have the right to do. And there's the conflation between those things. The number of people who struggle to understand that basic distinction is pretty mind-boggling. Here's another video from this woman, and here she is explaining, we're not gonna play the whole thing because it goes on at length, but it is all about cake and why it's oppressive to make people feel bad about the amount of cake that they eat. Listen.
CRFI. If you're like many women, you've been to a birthday party or a small office gathering, an event that's meant to bring people together. There's swinging tunes, some adult beverages, and good convo. And then it comes time to cut the cake, and someone decides to ruin everything.
Oh my God, that slice is huge. That slice is bigger than Beyonce's paycheck. Can you cut me half of that?
A cake-related fatphobic incident, or CRFI, is that moment when it's time to eat delicious cake and it's interrupted by a moralizing impulse. Inevitably, there's always someone at the party who has to declare publicly that their slice is too large, and that the person who's cutting the cake, almost invariably a woman, must do some disproportionate amount of labor in order to accommodate their need to feel superior. Let's take a look.
Can you do a little bit?
Cake-related fatphobic incident is what she just said, and not as a joke. That was not meant to be a joke. I'm not sure I've ever seen a video that better illustrates multiple important points about these woke activists. Let's talk about something that affects all of us: taxes. The October 15th deadline is passed. If you're not prepared, you could be in for a world of hurt. Do you owe back taxes? Are your returns still unfiled? Did you miss the deadline to file for an extension? Now that we're past October 15th, the IRS is probably gearing up for some aggressive enforcement. Trust me, you don't want to be on their radar. We're talking wage garnishments, frozen bank accounts, or even property seizures. It's not pretty, folks, but before you start panicking, there's still hope. Tax Network USA has helped taxpayers save over $1 billion in tax debt and filed over 10,000 tax returns. These guys specialize in reducing tax burdens for hardworking Americans just like you. Look, I get it. Dealing with the IRS is about as fun as a root canal, but ignoring the problem won't make it go away. So here's what you got to do. Don't wait any longer. For a complimentary consultation, call today at 1-800-958-1000 or visit their website at tnusa.com/Walsh. Their experts will walk you through a few simple questions to see how much you could save. That's 1-800-958-1000. Visit tnusa.com/Walsh today. Don't let the IRS take advantage of you. Get the help you need with Tax Network USA. Maybe first and foremost, this is why wokeness is dying. This right here. I mean, not this specific video about cake, but this kind of thing, this utterly inane bull. It's so ridiculous. It's so just vapid and preposterous that it's not sustainable. I mean, it collapses out of exhaustion. You know, the people in that video probably collapse out of exhaustion after walking up the steps, but and wokeness is kind of like that. It is also collapsing out of exhaustion. And I was talking about this recently with, I think it was with Adam Carolla on his show, that wokeness reached a point, it crossed a threshold, and beyond that threshold, once it crossed it, you could debate exactly when that moment was, but once it was crossed, its end, its demise became inevitable because the suspension of disbelief was just too much. And what I mean is that wokeness has always relied not on convincing people of its claims, because almost nobody was convinced about any of this stuff. Whether it's the racial stuff, the fat phobia, gender ideology, of course, big one. Very few people were ever convinced of the claims of left-wing activists. So people weren't convinced, they weren't persuaded, but rather the left was cajoling people into pretending that they were convinced. wokeness thrived even though 99% of the country never believed it. Most of them pretended to. But eventually the burden of pretending became too great because the things that they were being forced to pretend, the beliefs that they were being told they have to falsely adopt, were just too outlandish. It was too out there. It was too far-fetched. It was too embarrassing and too outrageous and too insane. You know, it was one thing when the left, we used to call it just political correctness. Before it became wokeness, it was just, you know, and political correctness. We lived in a politically correct culture for decades. And that was the kind of thing that most people would just go along with, even if they thought it was a little bit silly. But they kept pushing and they kept pushing. And then it became something that it's just too, even someone who desires to be sort of polite and to not to rock the boat, and someone who's more kind of wired to be non-confrontational, which is most people. Those are the people who were cajoled into going along with wokeness. But it only works up to a point, and you can get to a point where the average person, what you're trying to force them to pretend they believe or to, you know, nod along with, and smile and nod and sort of accept, it's just too much. It's too outrageous. And this is a good example of that. You know, this kind of thing where it's fatphobic. First of all, the idea of fatphobia, just the term itself is too much for most people. It's ridiculous. And everything else there too. And the other thing you see in that video is that for most woke activists, their whole worldview is really structured around their own personal pet peeves and hang-ups and anxieties. So in this case, you've got a bunch of women who feel embarrassed when another woman eats less cake than they do. And so that's what this is really all about. That when they're at a work function or you know, someone brings cake to the break room, and or they're at a party, and when they see a woman who's in good shape, say, "Oh, I'll take a smaller piece." These other women who are fat feel that makes them feel embarrassed, and because they know they're about to chow down on the whole damn. In fact, they were going to ask for a bigger piece than what they were being served, and now they've constructed a whole philosophy really around condemning that skinny woman who wanted less cake. It's like their whole worldview, their whole personal philosophy is really just structured around that woman, and condemning her and all of that. That's basically what wokeness is. Hey YouTube, thanks for listening to the show. If you'd like access to my full show with no ads, you should go to dailywire.com and use promo code Walsh to get 2 months free on all annual plans. See you there.